Have you ever seen someone die? I was a fireman once. I did it actively for about 8 years, both career and volunteer. Accordingly, I've accumulated a decent batch of stories. The calls I hated being dispatched to the most were car accidents. There's absolutely no easy way to know what you're going to be presented with. Sometimes you arrive at a scene where the cars don't look too bad, but somehow somebody has died. Other times, you brace for the worst, expecting to see someone's lifeless face, only to find that everyone is standing on the side of the road, shaken, but okay. And sometimes it's bad enough that everyone rides back to the station in contemplative silence. The worst happened on an otherwise bland and humid summer afternoon in the smallish town where I volunteered. We were hanging around the station going about our typical routines. I was mowing the grass when we were dispatched to what sounded like a simple routine car accident. I shut off the mower, threw on my gear like I'd done 100 times before and jumped into the back of the engine that was specially equipped for crashes. It had a full set of hydraulic tools designed to cut, push, or spread metal. We signed on to the radio and told dispatch we were responding. Dispatch informed us that they'd received multiple calls now stating that someone was still inside the vehicle. A few seconds later, they told us that the police had arrived on the scene and were confirming 2 people were trapped. Then, and this has only happened to me once, the officer on scene called us over the private channel and said, exact words, "You guys need to get here now." His voice was clearly that of someone barely holding it together long enough to make that transmission. My heart sank. I was only 19 at the time, and as immature and stupid as this may sound now, this was the kind of call I had dreamed of getting. But now that it was actually happening, I wanted nothing to do with it. I felt ashamed for ever having been excited by the idea of something like this. When we arrived, we saw a car that had clearly flipped at least once and was sitting crooked on a small embankment off the road. I was assigned to operate the hydraulic spreaders. Jaws of Life is a brand name, but ours were functionally the same. I opened the cab door, hopped down, and didn't even make it halfway to the tool compartment before someone grabbed me by the collar and started slamming me against the side of the engine. It was the mother of 2 little boys, ages 4 and 6, trapped in the car. One was in the back seat, the other in the front. She was screaming, "Get them out of there. You have to get them out. What took you so long? We waited so long." Her grip was unbelievably strong. A police officer pulled her away, sat her on the ground, and cuffed her. I could tell he hated doing it, but it was necessary. She was completely beyond reason. I grabbed the spreaders, walked up to the car, and finally saw what had shaken the cops so badly. The screaming. It was piercing, raw, and unrelenting. To this day, I can hear it more clearly in my head than the sirens, the generators, the hiss of hydraulics, or the chatter on the radio. And I hadn't even reached the car yet. When I got to the vehicle, I saw the younger child sitting in the front seat was obviously dead. The older boy was the one screaming. His clothes were completely soaked with blood. At that moment, I understood the mother. She wasn't just hysterical. Her panic was now my panic. Time behaves differently in moments like that. I can still recall vividly the smell of leaking antifreeze, the sweat running into my eyes, the scent of my gloves, and the screaming and blood that drowned everything else out. The spreaders were working well, but the side of the car was so badly mangled that it was hard to get a solid purchase point. Still, I was making progress, and that was a kind of relief I haven't felt since. Then the screaming stopped and the silence that followed was louder than the chaos before. I can't prove it, but I'm fairly certain even the car door knew it needed to yield to that void. It popped open just seconds later. The medics grabbed him, placed him on a stretcher, and wheeled him away. That's when I saw his face clearly for the first time, and I recognized him. He was in my sister's class. I remembered his face from one of her birthday parties, but that was all. I didn't know if he was shy, outgoing, loud, quiet, playful, nothing. All I knew was the sound of his scream, the silence that followed, and what his face looked like as death hovered over it. He was pronounced dead not long after arriving at the ER. He never stood a chance. Neither did his mother. She's attempted to take her own life a few times since, but the worst part was the ride back to the station. It was dead silent. Normally, we joke around or talk about what just happened, maybe even where to grab lunch, but not this time. No one said a word. All I could think about was my sister. That poor girl. She'd hear about this tomorrow and she wouldn't understand. Tomorrow, her cheerful little world would darken. And I knew it. And she didn't. When I got home that evening, my mom was sitting up in the living room. She'd heard the sirens and asked what had happened. Couldn't hold it in anymore. All I could get out was, "Mom, I have to tell you something." As the other emergency medical technician was willing to share, so will I. This call made me quit working emergency 911 services for 3 years and switch to working for a non-emergency medical transport company. Basically driving elderly patients to their dialysis appointments. It was mid-October, my favorite time of the year. I was goofing around playing the original Call of Duty on Xbox. My partner was destroying me 5-1. Our lieutenant had just walked in and asked if I was winning, then started teasing me for losing as firefighters usually do. Suddenly, the lights in the station flickered, turned off and back on quickly, and then the alert tones dropped. That familiar high-pitched tone came through. "Attention generic fire department medics. Attention generic police department. Rescue engine 6:1. Ambulance 6:1. All units respond to 1234. Main Street for a vehicle accident with entrapment." We sprinted to the trucks. I was riding in the paramedic position due to being the most experienced emergency medical technician at the intermediate level in our department. We didn't have certified paramedics, just technicians trained to the National Registry EMT Intermediate 1999 standard, which is a level between basic EMT and full paramedic. So in this call, it was me, 2 other firefighters in the engine, 1 lieutenant, and 2 emergency medical technicians at the basic level in the ambulance. We headed toward the scene, moving fast, but not recklessly. On the way, the laptop mounted in the lieutenant's seat updated with a new note. Rescue engine 6:1. Confirmed entrapment according to the caller. Seconds later, our radios crackled to life. Our dispatcher, clearly distressed, called engine 6:1 ETA. Engine 6:1 for minutes out. Engine 6 to step it up. Caller reports the vehicle is now on fire. Engine 6:1. Copy. Our driver floored it. We were now going close to 90 miles per hour. The other firefighters were putting on their gear. I did too, though. I left my breathing mask off since I'd be doing mostly emergency medical work. Suddenly, a police cruiser came flying up behind us. He passed and cleared ahead of us, probably doing 140. I was relieved, knowing he had a small fire extinguisher in his trunk. Maybe he could do something before we arrived, even though we were only a minute behind. We saw him slam on the brakes and jump out with his extinguisher, spraying at the burning car. From about a third of a mile away, I could already see thick smoke pouring off the vehicle. Someone was standing near it. As we pulled up, dispatch came over the radio again, now crying. Engine 6:1. Please hurry. That hit hard. Dispatchers almost never cry on the radio. We screeched to a halt. One firefighter grabbed a bumper hose. Our engineer was already setting up the water line. I grabbed my trauma bag and ran toward the car. A woman was standing there with her arms inside the burning car, reaching into the back seat. This was an older model vehicle. During the crash, the doors had somehow locked, or maybe they hadn't right away, but she was too focused on getting her kids out and missed her chance. Then the fire started and she couldn't get them out. The sound she was making wasn't a scream for help. It was deep, guttural. The kind of sound someone makes when they've already done everything they can and know it wasn't enough. It was horrifying. I ran to her, grabbed her, and pulled her away from the fire. She was literally on fire. Her entire front side had already burned through, and her pants were starting to go up, too. But she didn't care. She refused to stay down. The police officer had to physically hold her on the ground while I ran back to the car. I reached into the back seat and pulled out a badly burned 3-year-old. I sat him down and began emergency treatment. But even looking at him, I knew he wasn't going to make it. The woman, his mother, screamed about her other child. I tried reaching again, but I couldn't get to the second child. At first, my arms were starting to burn. I gave it one last desperate pull, and the entire car seat came out with the body still in it. That child was obviously dead. At that moment, I didn't have time to think. I had one red tag, critical but alive, one black tag, deceased, and one child who was right on the edge. I got one of the emergency medical technicians into the ambulance to try to ventilate the mother while I focused on the toddler. His arms were burned into that heartbreaking classic position of fire fatalities. Drawn up, curled inward like a fetal pose. He wasn't making a sound, but his eyes were wide open and he was staring right at me. I placed my fingers on his neck and felt one faint pulse, then another, and then nothing. That was it. 2 weeks later, the woman died in the intensive care unit. A month after that, I tried to take my own life. Telling this story now has me crying again. I wish I had been better at my job. My father died last year. I'm a physician in Mexico and I was with him at the hospital the moment he passed away. He had liver cancer, an extremely aggressive one. That day started badly right from the early morning. He was in constant abdominal pain so intense it made him cry, and yet he was still one of the toughest people I've ever known. That morning my mom called to tell me he was having a really hard time. He was struggling to breathe and was deteriorating quickly. We rushed him to the hospital right away. I remember it like it was today. While I was driving, he looked at me and told me how proud he was of me and thanked me for taking care of him. I honestly don't know how I stayed strong and kept myself from crying because I didn't want him to feel worse by seeing me in tears. We arrived at the emergency department. At that point, there wasn't much more I could do for him. I had to step back and let my colleagues take over. My mom stayed with him during his time in observation. Here in Mexico, in most public hospitals under the Social Security system, only one relative is allowed to stay with the patient in the emergency department. As I mentioned, I'm a doctor. From the very beginning, I understood what was probably going to happen. When a chronically ill terminal patient arrives at the emergency department, the primary goal is to stabilize them and transfer them quickly to a hospital bed in one of the inpatient floors. The reason for this is the overwhelming demand for care and the severe shortage of space and resources in the emergency unit. In other words, we know the patient likely won't survive, but we try to give them at least some dignity and comfort. With all that in mind, it was now around 4:30 in the morning on May 13, 2011. My mom and I had gone more than a full day without eating or sleeping. We were on the 7th floor with my unconscious father, who was heavily sedated to manage his pain. By around 6 a.m., I started noticing long labored pauses between his breaths and a slightly irregular heartbeat. The first thought that came to mind was I turned to my mom and gently told her that she could go home and rest for a while and later one of my brothers could come stay with me. But the truth is I already knew my dad was about to suffer a major complication. And I didn't want her to witness what was coming. And just as I expected, about an hour after she left, his breathing began to slow down dramatically. I knew he was finally going to rest. I made the conscious decision not to alert the staff. My father had been through so much suffering, and all I wanted at that point was for him to pass peacefully without pain, without machines, without any more interventions. I held his hand tightly. I whispered all the things I was grateful for. I gave him one last kiss on the forehead and stayed right there holding his hand until his final breath. I don't regret that decision. Liver cancer is sometimes referred to as king cancer for a reason. My father only lasted 3 months from the moment it was diagnosed. Found by chance during an unrelated exam. If more people truly understood what terminal cancer looks like up close, if they saw what those final stages do to a person, I don't think they'd be able to bear watching someone they love go through that kind of torment. In the end, I feel both grateful for and cursed by my profession. From the beginning, I knew the likely complications, the prognosis, the outcome. And in some way, I'm thankful that medicine has made my emotions strong enough to live through moments like this, even when they break you inside. I miss my dad every single day. This is the first time I've ever talked about this other than with my friend who watched it happen with me. We were 16 or 17 years old, heading out to dinner one night with my mom driving us. It was my birthday dinner. We stopped at a red light and I looked to my left and saw a girl sprinting toward the intersection. Her clothes were torn and she couldn't have been older than 17. It was obvious she was running for a reason. She had this look on her face that still haunts me to this day. It looked like someone was chasing her, but I was never able to confirm it. I watched it happen. It felt like time slowed down as she decided that risking the street was better than stopping. She made it 2 lanes out of 3. But the poor guy in the 3rd lane never saw her coming. She had just cleared the van in the middle lane, so the driver in the 3rd lane didn't have a chance to react. He slammed on his brakes, but he still hit her, doing at least 50 miles per hour. I swear to God, she made eye contact with me. I've never seen anything as horrifying as that. People joke about shoes coming off when someone's hit by a car. It's a lot less funny when the foot is still in the shoe. My mom was an emergency room nurse. She didn't even hesitate. She was out of the car instantly, and so was everyone else on the street. We all gathered around as my mom tried to help her. I watched her choke on her own blood and vomit. My mom cried. One of the only times I've ever seen her cry in my entire life. She kept repeating, "It's not fair." The girl locked eyes with me in between convulsions. I couldn't do anything but stare. And then her eyes went hollow. I threw up and sobbed. I'm a 6 feet 2 inches guy, ugly, crying in the middle of the street. I've never cried like that before, and I haven't since. Just thinking about it right now is making me fight back tears at.